Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Kegley here. Full deck of cards tonight. We got Kedrick Prince. We have Brad Sturdy, Matt Stevens. We're going to be talking a lot of things Illini, kind of switching through a variety of subjects tonight. But let's start off. I've got a Heat Checks and Hail Mary that's going to come out tomorrow, and I wanted to get your guys' response for this, and I wanted to see what you guys had to say. So here it goes. For the first time in my life, the Illini have a head coach that both Iowa and Wisconsin wish they had. It's a new world out there for Big Ten fans. The Fighting Illini have a strong and well-rounded head football coach at the helm of the program for only the third time since I was born. For the first time in my life, two of the Illini's closest competitors, both Iowa and Wisconsin, would love to have the Illini head coach running their football program. So let's take a look at the coaches of the three schools since 1967, and I have them up there on the screen. And I'm going to say something that sounds a little mean, but from 1967 to 1979, I don't see any of the three schools having a coach with the talent to elevate themselves above the other two schools. And whether it's fair or unfair, let's just say the 70s were tough on all three schools, and none of the coaches would be what anybody would call a keeper. In 1979, Hayden Fry turned up and turned the Hawkeyes around. Then next year, Mike White hit the Big Ten scene and worked his magic for the Illini, turning around the Illini as Fry did for Iowa. White was followed by Makovic, who was a strong coach. Despite the Illini duo of competent coaches, I think one has to give the edge to Fry because he stayed there so long. He had winning ways, and he stayed out of the NCAA doghouse. Then Barry Alvarez arrived in Madison in 1990 and turned the Badgers around. He arguably passed up the Hawkeyes to become the premier non-Ohio State and Michigan team in the Big Ten. Even newcomer Penn State had to deal with the ascension of the Badgers. After Alvarez, Ferentz ruled the roost, although Bielema might have passed him up had he stayed in Madison as opposed to going to Arkansas. Now, as Kirk nears retirement and seems cursed with Iowa teams that have absolutely no offense, and Wisconsin deals with a killer schedule in Fickell's third year, Brett Bielema's name comes up again, having resurrected the Illini football program from the dead and taking the team to an extremely rare 10-win season in 2024. I think it's fair to say that if given the choice, maybe either AD from Iowa or Wisconsin would love to have Brett Bielema as their head coach. Thus, for the first time in my lifetime, the Illini have a clear-cut coaching advantage over both Iowa and Wisconsin in football, and it feels good. Illini fans are expecting to have a great run over the next few years. It's yet another example of the critical need to have the right guy in place as the head coach of a college football team. The Illini have not accomplished that often in their over 100 years of football competition. Josh Whitman has accomplished that in hiring Brett Bielema. Thank goodness. Brad, any thoughts on, am I too over the top on that?
No, I think that's accurate, especially when you consider in the ages of, Kirk Ferentz. He's looking he doesn't have much time left. So, but yeah, I think Bielema is a guy that they would either one want to trade for. The Luke Fickell experiment's been kind of a disaster at this point. When you consider you fire a coach for winning the same number of games that he seems to be winning. Now, is he rebuilding and they're changing the format, whatever? But, I would venture to say he better have a good year this year because they'll be looking to get rid of him this year. So, and I think he's a good football coach. I really do.
Right.
And the right program, he's going to be successful, but that right program may not be Wisconsin. So, but yeah, Illinois is in a great place. I mean, and with the changes in the revenue sharing and the NIL and all those things, it's actually been very beneficial to Illinois as both a football and basketball program.
Kid?
Well, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but is it okay to say sometimes it's okay to have a little luck? And what I mean by that is when Brett Bielema was hired, I mean, not a lot of people were excited about the hire. I know Matt has covered football for a long time, and Brett was very successful at Wisconsin. And Mike, we did a podcast, and you remember, I think Brad, you were there. I was one of the most excited fans in the world, only because I wanted a program that was stable. And Brett Bielema he's starting to build a program that's stable. Now, to answer your question, where I live at, I'm friends with a lot of Iowa guys that cover the University of Iowa. And I'm telling you, one guy I want to mention, I'm not trying to plug him, is Tom Kakert, who's very connected with the University of Iowa. When Illinois hired him, he was the first person, regardless if you're an Illinois fan or media member, to call me and said, gosh, damn it. And I said, what? He said, that was the guy that was going to replace Kirk Ferentz. Because, one, he's an Iowa guy. He is not stubborn. Brett just has a system. And Brad just mentioned Kirk Ferentz has a system. He runs a really, really good system where Mike, you and I are probably the biggest hotheads when it comes to how the offense is being run. But I stopped saying it because at the end of the day, he wins games. And I think when I mentioned Luck, I think Luke Fickell is a hell of a coach. I just do. And I think right now, I don't think Luck's on his side. And because I do think he's a good coach, and Brad mentioned that, he better turn around this year. But having said that, Illinois is really lucky. And I think Brett wants to be here. And I love how connected he is with the fans, the media, and with the recruits, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But that's probably my favorite thing about him is the comments and feedback that I get from recruits when they talk about committing to Illinois and why they committed.
Matt?
I wouldn't have gone as far as you, Mike, and say that Illinois has a coaching advantage. I just don't think Illinois has a coaching disadvantage, if that makes any sense. What you don't hear out of Iowa,
which is a step up for Illinois.
No, I get it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But if that makes sense to everybody, like you get how, like, okay, if we don't go in, with one strike in the batter's box because of our coaching staff, then that's a win for Illinois. If you look at it that way. What I'll say is, what you don't hear when you talk about if you talk to Iowa fans about their football program, the one thing you don't hear, boy, I wish Kirk would just leave. Like they kind of understand where their lot is in life and how good they have it with Kirk Ferentz and how good they have it with Phil Parker running that defense. And the minute that stops happening, I kind of wonder what happens to Iowa football, to be honest with you. There's a lot of, hey, be careful what you wish for if you want Iowa to score a lot more points, because that doesn't necessarily going to result in Iowa winning a lot more football games. And then with the Wisconsin thing, I'll never understand, and I'll always wonder why Luke Fickell hired the offensive coordinator that he hired to start his tenure in Wisconsin. I don't understand it. The Phil Longo hire makes no absolute sense to me whatsoever, and I think he's eating it now, having to basically kind of backtrack and trying to get Wisconsin back to the identity that they were when they hired Luke Fickell, which they probably should have been doing in the first place. So, I think Bielema is on even ground in terms of trying to win football games each and every Saturday in the fall with both Kirk Ferentz, who I think will go down, and I think he's going to be college football Hall of Fame worthy if he keeps the 60% thing. And then Phil Parker, who I think is the best defensive coordinator in the country, and then Luke Fickell got Cincinnati in the playoff, fellas. So, like, if you think that he's just a dog of a football coach, I got news for you. And nobody has said that on this panel, but I'm just telling you, I think there's ways for Wisconsin to kind of get it back, and he might be the guy to do it, but he also needs to be the guy to do it this year, like Sturdy said. Otherwise, they're gonna get restless in Madison, and they're gonna want to hire the guy in Kansas and then bring him home.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I just thought that what we had, it's kind of been a big change, and Illinois has not been successful in getting the man into the role, and I think that Whitman has really done quite a number when you see what's going on in the two basketball programs, the football program. Obviously, golf is not anything of his doing. And I would like to see the volleyball program get straightened out a little bit, but I think that gets a lot of your revenue going in the right direction.
Mike, can I make a comment if you don't mind? Just I'll be really quick. When the two teams, really weird that you mentioned those two teams. Right now, school's out, summer's out, so I have a little bit more free time to look on boards. I'm going to tell you, a lot of people are not happy seeing the Illini potentially being a college football playoff team. I mean, let's think about it. It's out of the realm. It just doesn't happen. And so when you see Wisconsin, losing recruits to Illinois, or Iowa losing recruits to Illinois, they struggle with that. And when you look on, regardless of who you follow, there's so many publications out there, they believe in this program. So now Iowa and Wisconsin, some of the other programs, Michigan State, Minnesota, they're thinking, damn, you know what, Illinois is going to be good again, or not good again, but they're going to be good. So it's another team that they have to worry about. So that's nice to see. I don't know about you three, but I'm not accustomed to it because, yeah, they may be good one year, but you look at the recruiting and, it seems more stable, I guess.
Yeah, and it is. I think you can look at Josh Whitman, and I don't know if it's force of will or what, but he certainly has started to get this thing rolling on multiple levels at the same time, which Illinois just has had such struggles over the decades to do. So let's take a look. We talked a little bit about football there. There has been a ton of activity that Illinois has been involved in the transfer portal. And I don't know that they're necessarily going for the home run, but they're building depth. I thought I would ask each of you guys for a couple, 2 or 3 names in the football transfer portal that you like, and maybe why you like them as we head into June here. Brad, anyone that stands out to you of these individuals? Of course, for those people who are IlliniGuys subscribers, Steve Sturm does a very thorough article on every single person who commits. So there's a nice resource to take a look at. But Brad, I just want to know from your ideas what you're thinking.
Well, I mean, if we're going all the way through this transfer portal, I like James Thompson Jr. I think is really important because it was a need position. And I think the other guy for me that was a huge need position is Hudson Clement. I think those were positions they needed to fill. Those were spots where they needed help. They needed veteran presence there. Now, my guy that I like, and I may be alone on this, I don't know, but I think, and I don't think it's this year, but I think Illinois has a very old offensive line, veteran group. I think Aiden Napick is a guy who's going to be really good after a year here in this system. I think next year we're going to look at him as being an impact addition a year from now. Now, of course he could transfer again before then, who knows? But I mean, that's just giving you an idea. That's a guy that I really like his upside and potential. So he's a guy that I like a lot. And then the other one I would say that was good that they added was obviously adding some depth in the kicking game is always a good thing too. So making sure they have enough kickers and punters on the field, because man, we saw last year when the punter had rough days, sometimes that was rough.
Well, I'm going to be a little different here. I know we're talking about this class, but the guy I'm really, really excited about is Cole Rusk. I know he was on the roster last year, but he is a transfer. And I think everything that and we've all heard is just how, his size, his speed at the tight end position, to me is very, very, is huge. I think that's important because they don't throw the ball to a lot of tight ends, and we know that Illinois is recruiting tight ends. So maybe Cole's healthy. I think he will give them another dimension on offense. And, one of the things about following Brad Sturdy, he always still is one of my guys. And Hudson Clement is huge for me because here's why I like him. I like him because of what they lost. And here's a guy that's a veteran player, and I like the way Illinois went about recruiting him. They kept it hush-hush. People didn't know about it. And when they go about getting a kid that's hush-hush and people don't know about it, in their eyes, they see something in him that's going to help them win games. So those are 2 guys to me. Obviously you had the Wisconsin transfers and James Thompson Jr. and those guys, but I'm really looking forward to Rusk. And I mean, Hudson Clement to me, I really, really hope he does what they think he can do and what they brought him in to do.
Matt?
Brad stole my first one, which was James Thompson, because when I saw him in the spring, he just doesn't look like the way defensive linemen should look. Like, I mean, it's clear he gets off the bus and you go, okay, that's a guy that's probably going to get a look in the 3-letter league. And they need him to be really, really good after what they lost on the D-line. I would go Kurt Neal just again into the other Wisconsin transfer on the defensive line, because if you're going to do a Brett Bielema program, his impact guys in the transfer portal are always going to be the guys closest to the football, closest to the line of scrimmage. And like, yeah, Brad, the third one is Keelan Cremens. Like, I mean, if you're, yeah, I mean, I'm going to, like, of course, yeah, I'm going to take the punter, because honestly, like if Brett Bielema wants to play the field position game the way that he's probably going to have to this year, and wants to flip the field and do the football 101 stuff, you got to have a punter that can bury people. And he has the ability to do that. And quite frankly, after what I saw in the spring, like if he's not the guy, like they're in trouble, because they don't have anybody else at punter that's, worth a darn. And so he needs to be really, really good for your special teams to be really, really good. And I gave you just three guys that accomplish two of the things that Brett Bielema wants to do: run the ball, stop the run, and cover kicks. Like that's a big deal to him. The one that I love that Sturdy gave Aiden Napick, because he is the guy that basically, if you ever like walk down a school and you see the fire extinguisher and it says, "In case of emergency, break glass," I'm fascinated by whether or not Illinois is going to have to break that glass in 2025. Because I know the plan isn't, but if something happens to J.C. Davis or the right tackle at Illinois, which is probably going to be Brandon Henderson, like they're going to have to break that glass and not redshirt him. So he kind of accomplishes the idea of being an emergency tackle if they need him in 2025, or being a starting tackle in 2026. So that's why they went and got him. But he's fascinating what role he's going to have in 2025 if he has to have one.
Yeah, I think those are good ones. And it, like I said, for my way of looking at it, I do like some of the size too. Some of these guys, Big Eli is a guy that might be a year or two away, but I like the idea of trying to get somebody, and if you can keep them here, the transfer portal giveth and the transfer portal taketh away. But if you can keep them here, I think that's a good move there as well. We got a couple questions that come in. First off, if Luke gets backed up, Matt, is there a pecking order now that's pretty apparent in the quarterback room?
I mean, if he gets hurt or like has to, like,
Yeah,
they have to go to a backup. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Ethan Hampton. I saw it in the spring. There's clearly a drop off right now in terms of just playing experience and just kind of the way that they, I don't know, walk the walk on a daily basis. Ethan Hampton has that kind of walk to him of, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, just let me figure out this playbook kind of thing. So yeah, if anything were to happen to Luke, Ethan Hampton's your guy. And I think that the offense changes tremendously because the arm talent isn't the same as Luke's, and the ability to kind of do what they want to do on the outside isn't the same as Luke's. So, but I also think that even with Luke this year, Illinois is going to try to figure out a way to run the ball. So I don't know how it would change all that much. I just think they'd have to be a more physical at the line of scrimmage team if Ethan Hampton's your quarterback. But yeah, I don't think there's a battle anymore going into like fall camp between, Ethan Hampton and or any of the other guys, whether it's, Carson Boyd was probably never going to factor into it, but I don't think Trey Petty has. I think Trey Petty's goal this year is to travel, which is something he did at the end of the year, but certainly needs to be on the travel roster this year.
Brad or Ked, any thoughts on that?
No, I would agree with Matt. I think that I think Ethan Hampton, that's why they brought him in, is so they have a veteran guy to be available to play if something happens to Luke Altmaier, because you have too much talent and you've invested so much into this season. You can't just turn it over as an unproven guy or a guy who doesn't have experience. So I think that was why he came, and that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. I'm not going to rehash it, but that's one of the reasons. You're right. You bring an older guy in, bring a transfer in, because the one thing you don't want to do, in my opinion, is you're expected to have a good season. Now that the young guys, aren't capable, but it sure is nice to have a veteran back there who's not afraid and who's been through the wars. And the offense may change. Who knows? Matt's probably right. but at least you know that you're going to have a guy that's played at that level before and not being thrown to the wolves. I think Trey Petty's the future. I love him as a football player, but I don't think that's right, and he'd be a guy that's going to get you 10, 11 wins this season, I don't think.
And then the other question that kind of came up is what do we think the depth chart is at the running back position? I'll let Matt kind of start it off, and then we can talk, follow up on that.
It's the Central Illinois Power Company.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, Aiden Lawfrey and Caden Fagan, and then you're probably trying to figure out a way to get Khalil Valentine on the field, otherwise, but you can't get him on the field on third downs because he can't block for anything. So you can't have him in on third downs when you want to throw the football, or he's got to get a lot better at that, quite frankly. So I think you're going to see a lot of Aiden and you're going to see a lot of Caden. The question is, can they stay healthy enough to make an impact as a 1-2? Because if they can't, then you're going to see a lot more of Khalil Valentine, and then Khalil Valentine needs to figure out bits. I would, if I was him, and I know that Thad Ward has just drilled this into him, like I would do everything I could to try to figure out blitz pickup, like he tried to do in the spring, and then has fall camp to do it too, because if he can be somebody that they can put out there on third downs, then you've got something that you thought you had in your running back room when Josh McCray left for Georgia. But there is a void there, but it can be easily massaged over if Aiden and Caden can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would agree with that. I think that they're different. They're such different guys. Caden Fagan and Aiden Lawfrey is so different, so they can use that. And I think Valentine has a little bit of both guys in his. I mean, he's a little bit more powerful than Lawfrey, but he's not as, maybe not as fast. But he does. What I like about Valentine is he has like that quick twitch kind of cutback ability. He can make that. He's like a little jitterbug, right? So the Barry Sanders stuff. Not at that level, trust me. But I mean, no, not at that level. But still, he's got that more shake and bake maybe than the other guys. So I think they're all different. And the thing is, I think depending on how it's working, you may find different guys in different plays. For different series, say, hey, let's try this and see if this works. But I like that they still got to stay healthy though, because without when they get hurt, man, that's why and Lawfrey has to stay healthy and I know Fagan's a big guy, but he's also been battling injuries a lot too. But if they don't have those guys, it really takes away from what they can be offensively, because they're going to run the football. It's just that simple.
Well, we're all going to talk about the same three guys. My thing is, Caden, he's been injury prone for most of his career. Here's a guy that I remember sitting in the press box in his freshman year, listen to some NFL scouts to my right. He had a couple good runs, and he's not the fastest guy, but he's not the slowest guy. And I think there's a spot for him in the NFL, and I know that was one of the reasons he committed to Illinois, was because they were going to showcase him. But the depth there is great, and like you mentioned with Aiden as well, they're just really, really – the backfield is great. And Khalil's a guy for being 5'11", and that's being kind, I think, is just that guy. He's tough. All the guys are tough, but they all bring something different. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, was Aiden, who, when Illinois played Northwestern, when he came in and just totally changed the game, if that's who it was, if I remember correctly. But it just gives you a different look. And I think it's tough as a defensive coordinator to have to try to scheme for all three guys like that.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it's nice to see the guys they've got coming in too, because they've got a couple freshmen that also look pretty good out there as well. So this is probably as strong of a running back room as we've seen in a while. Maybe Brad, start with you. What are your expectations now that you've kind of seen a little bit of the portal time? There might be a few changes here and there, but what are your rough expectations here? It's still, we're not doing a prediction this early, but where do you think this team is going to come out this year?
Well, I think they're going to win. They're going to be in a bowl game. I think they're going to win. I think it's going to be kind of a season. My personal opinion is probably going to be a disappointment for some people, because I think the expectations are so high, and there are some tough games on that schedule that are not going to be easy to win. But I think they're going to go 8-4. Now, should that ever be a disappointment for an Illinois football team? No. But will it be based on the fact that they're ranked in the top 16 and being picked to be in the playoff and all these things? Now, could they go 10-2, 11-1? They could. I mean, it's out there. But they're going to have to win a ton of close games. And that's hard to do. I mean, if you go, let's say you go 5-4 in the close games, you win some easy ones, whatever. That's good. You start going 6-3, 7-1, or 7-2, 8-1 in close games. Well, then, hey, now that you're rolling, but that's hard to do. And so I don't think they have a roster that's just going to go out and blow people out. So it's going to take execution, all those little things. So that's my prediction. That's my guess. But I think that we have to put in perspective what your expectations should be, are to have a football team that can compete with basically everybody they play and has a chance to win every time they step on the field, and they do. And that's a huge step forward for this Illinois program.
That's what the Illinois fans wanted, a chance to go out in the field and compete. When Lovie Smith was there, that didn't happen. You can go back and listen to the last 2 podcasts I've done on this network. I'm telling you, and I'm not going to change my mind, the schedule is a concern for me. I know they're talented, and I know there's, what ifs and all these kind of things. And if you go back and look at last year, how bad was Purdue? But it was a shootout. And so all these teams are no longer going to look at Illinois and say, well, we can chalk this up as a win because it's not going to be that way. I don't know if the luck's going to be on their side, but to me, I don't think going to Duke is easy. We saw what Indiana did last year. Indiana will try to run the score up, and I know USC they did a really good job in the transfer portal. That's not easy. And anybody thinks Ohio State's going to be easy? Those are 3 games right there that I mentioned. And there's always that one game where they should win and they don't play well. We started the show off talking about Wisconsin and Luke Fickell. Well, he has to win. And if he wants to continue to get recruits and not lose them to Illinois, he better start winning some of those games. I don't want people getting mad at me, but I'm not just going to say they're going to win 10, 11 games. I'm just not going to. Can they? Heck yeah, they possibly could. But to me, the schedule, I've learned and been in this business long enough to know the schedule matters, and it's not as easy as people think.
So I'm going to give the contrarian answer here. Shocking. For anybody that knows me. If Brett Bielema was listening, hi, Brett. He would echo the same thing that I'm going to say. The expectations that I have for this football program don't mean a damn thing. Like, I don't have expectations for this football team because I don't get to make the decisions on, like, how people want to be happy and how people don't want to be happy. Like, whatever. Like, what I can tell you is that I do know the expectations of the people in the Bielefeld building for the football program, and it is perfectly laid out in Brett Bielema's new contract, and that's to win more than 6 regular season games in a season. That's it. Like, if he does that, he gets another year of his contract and a raise, like, automatically renewed. And that's what they expect. That's the baseline of expectations for this football program, according to the people that decide whether or not Brett Bielema is employed. Now, that is not the expectations of the people inside the Smith Center who work in the football program, but that is the demarcation line of where the Bielefeld building sees the football program over the next 5, 6, 7 years. Just please be average every year, and please don't leave us. Like, that is what is put in Brett Bielema's contract. And I think that Brad's right. I think if they go somewhere like 7-5 and 8-4, I think the people in the Bielefeld building will quietly say that's a success, but they won't publicly, like, thump their chest and say it, because there's a lot of fans that have really, really high expectations of this football program. But I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of talent either coming to Champaign-Urbana, or that, like Ked said, they have to go play, that they could easily go and lose. The irony of the whole situation is that I want to know what the first month's going to look like before I know how the season's going to go, because I mean, they could easily be 2-2 by the time that USC comes to town at the end of September. And then God, I don't know what the hell is going to happen at the rest of the way home. So we'll see. But like, I do know that the expectation in the Bielefeld building lays it out perfectly that, hey, Brad, as long as you win more than 6 regular season games in a season, you're good with us, man. Like, and that's pretty much all he has to give a darn about.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say, if I was looking, right now, I'm a little bit more bullish, but I think it comes down to 2 things. One is, how good is the offensive line going to be? Because to me, the advantage Illinois has is Luke Altmaier with his experience, having that quarterback who's going into his third year, and the talent that he has. Can he maximize it out there on the field? He can't do it, as Buddy Ryan used to say. That guy can't throw on his back. And I think if the running attack can keep people off balance and the offensive line blocks well, I put Luke Altmaier as one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Illinois can probably leverage that to a 8-win season, and with a little bit of luck, maybe make it to 10. But like people say, the schedule is tough. And I look at that Duke game as being a little bit of a trap game. And then you can't tell me that Kurt Signetti hasn't circled that Illini game like 47 times on the calendar, where maybe that date's going to fall off because he's circled it so many times. Because I think he's got to look at this as Indiana. They're going to be playing the "we have no respect. Everybody said we shouldn't have been in the CFP last year," and then he's going to find some way to. Well, Illinois got all that respect because they got to beat South Carolina, and he's going to have the victim thing going. So I think that game is going to be a brutal game. I can't wait for it. So that's just my thoughts on that. Any other thoughts on the football team? There's a couple little comments in there, Brad, but any other final thoughts before we round over to basketball?
Not really. I think we covered it. I mean, the biggest thing for me is they have to stay healthy. They've added some depth pieces. I think that the portal's been good for, just to have some guys who have a little bit of experience who can come in and play if necessary. But if it's long term, that's not what you want. And football's become such a sport where, especially for teams who aren't Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State, who have 5 stars sitting over here who can't get time on the field. It's become who stays healthy is a huge part of who's going to win when it comes to the fall season. So, I mean, stay healthy, and they have a great opportunity to, reach their goals.
I want to see them get off the field. I don't want to see them, if they can get off the field and put teams in 3rd and long, I think that's going to benefit them. And that's saying something for me because I'm mostly an offensive guy, but I think if they can stay healthy and get off the field and not give teams chances to be putting 4th and 1 a lot, or a 3rd and 2, whatever, and then they continue to march the ball down the field, if they can, and you're going to be able to tell early on in the season if they're going to have the talent or the schemes to be able to do that, but not letting teams just drag the ball and run the defense down. And yes, the depth is there. That's probably the thing that I can't speak for everybody here in this panel, but that's probably one of the biggest things is, to me, the depth and the defense. And they're trying to make they're going in the right direction, which is why they went and got so many transfer players, especially from Wisconsin.
In the same way that I think the Kansas game last year was the most important game on the schedule, I think I agree with you, Kags. I think the Indiana game is the most important game on the schedule, because what it does is that, I mean, if you get through the Duke game, and look, Manny's going to have Duke ready to play, especially at home. But if you get past the Duke game and you're undefeated, and I'm going to tell you right now, Indiana is going to be undefeated. Like, their first 3 games.
Yeah, they're one of the few easy schedules.
Signetti knows what he's doing in his non-conference schedule, because, I mean, they're going to be 3-0. Okay. But yeah, that's the first test for both of these programs. And it's the first test for the 2025 Illini. Can you go and do this? Because if you can't go and do this, then you start shaking your head and going, well, can we beat Can we beat Southern Cal at home? Can we beat Ohio State at home? And then it starts to snowball a little bit, and then you've got Ryan Walters waiting for you in Seattle by the end of October, and that's not fun, right? And so I do think that the way that the season could go is, tell me whether or not they beat Indiana in Bloomington, because like last year, I was adamant and pounded the table. Tell me if they win the Kansas game, and I think that they drew a lot of momentum from that win going forward, and I think they could draw a lot of momentum from a win in Bloomington. But I also think it could go the other way too.
Yeah, I think it all starts with July 1. If they get the commitment from J.C. Anderson, it's all going. When he announces, his his equipment. That's the key to the season. There's my key to the season. So if he comes to Illinois, then it's going to be a good year. It's like the groundhog seeing his shadow. Whatever.
I'm all for that. I'm all for that. And if they can somehow find a way, I don't think it's going to happen, but if they could find a way to get the dynamic duo of tight ends to stay, that would be fantastic, because the Central it's really a time where you're starting to see the talent in Central Illinois creep up to levels that we're really not used to seeing when you look at JC and Sutter and some of these guys. I mean, that's, you already got a bunch of guys, you got the Gibson City, Arthur, Rochester, triumvirate on offense. I mean, it's pretty cool for folks who watch Central Illinois football on a Friday night. All right, let's before we switch to Illini basketball, any thoughts on this the CFP, going to this situation where it's a 5-11. I think with 5 conference champions, and if they go to the 11 at-larges, I think they are in DS is rolling. I think
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes, we will have Ket on the horn with Sutter's mom. Yes, we'll smooth that recruitment right out. But I think the 5-11. I do think this is a bit of snake oil from our friends in the SEC, because if it's 11 at-large bids as opposed to the 4-4 that they were looking at with the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to use ESPN to get like their 12th place team they're going to be preaching all day about how Auburn with 1 win in the SEC should probably be in the playoff. I just think that you're going to, you want to get the committee more involved and then get more politicking and anger going. I think this 5-11, which I love 16 teams, but the 5-11 is going to be absolutely nuts in my opinion. Brad, I mean, am I seeing a mirage there, or are you thinking the same thing?
I mean, I don't know how it's going to be a lot different. There's just going to be, I mean, it's no different than it was last year when, they were telling us South Carolina should have been in there. Alabama should have been in there, even though.
But if they did the 4-4, 2-2, 1-1 or whatever, at least then the SEC and the Big Ten are worried about their 4, and then they can do their little tournament and all that other stuff. And you don't have to worry about how everybody else sucks according to ESPN. Now that it's going to be a 5-11, it's going to be, oh goodness.
Okay, I get it, but there is a difference. If a team can't go like 10-2 in the Big 12 or the ACC in a conference that sucks, then you don't deserve to get in. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. So I don't have a problem with it. I don't know. I mean, yes, there'll be pundits, but we had, we've had this for years. Saban politicking to get into the playoff.
Yeah.
When he was at Alabama, he's on there. They didn't make the SEC championship game. He's politicking getting the playoff on the SEC championship game broadcast. I mean, so I don't think it changes, but I see what you're saying in the sense that it's possible that you could have the 5 conference champions and 5 or 6 teams for the SEC and 4 teams for the Big Ten, and that's it. Or whatever. That's all. That's the whole thing. And then we add one other team because we got to add we got to add like, I don't know, Navy or somebody.
Right,
I don't know,
right.
whoever it is. So, but yeah, so it's interesting. I do the one thing I do like about the only thing that I like that I really think is good is not doing the seeding model where you don't have the conference champions getting those top seeds.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And I'm sure they did that just so Notre Dame could actually get a seed now. I'm sure that was probably it's like we got to keep them happy. So I don't know.
Kid?
Well, one thing I want to see is the Big Ten throw their weight. I'm sick of the SEC just flexing their muscles and staying and pretty much getting what they want. I think there's enough good quality coaches, the commissioner, start flexing your muscles, because the bottom line is those are the 2 best conferences in college football. And if you're going to let one conference sit there and make all the decisions and politic and say all the right things, and then the Big Ten, you're going to sit and hope that things are going to go your way. It doesn't work that way to me. So, and I'm going to be careful and tread waters here, but that's not the philosophy for me, because you want the best teams in. I didn't personally, I didn't really care if Indiana got in or not last year. They had a great season. If there was Illinois on the other hand, fans would be mad if they didn't get in either. So, but me personally, I want to see them start barking. And you know what? We are one of the big boys, and we're not going to roll over and play dead.
Ked, they did the last 2 years because they got that big trophy that comes in.
Good point.
2 years in a row.
That's right, baby.
Yeah.
You're right.
Matt.
All right. I'm going to roll on this for a little bit because I'm going to dovetail off of what Ked just said. Of the four of us, raise your hand if you already knew the Big Ten had its spring meetings, because I did. But anybody else? No. No. You want to know why? Because they don't talk and they don't let media actually cover their spring meetings. So until you start doing that, you don't get your message out there. But I have covered the SEC spring meetings in Destin. I've done it 3 times. I actually enjoyed it. That is their way of getting out the message that they want to get out. And it's a way for Greg Sankey to actually respond to the criticism, so that his 16 school presidents don't have to. That's his job. That's why he's paid millions of dollars. But the Big Ten sees themselves as above all that. And until they stop doing that, they're not going to get their message out. And I'm telling you that one of the cool things that the SEC does is they don't see themselves as above all that, and they get their message out. And that's how you do that. And so it's not so much I think that the SEC is squawking too much. It's that the Big Ten thinks that they're above, and Tony Petitti thinks he's above all this, and he's not, and you're not. Get your message out there. Get what you want said out there. Start letting the Adam Rittenbergs and everybody else in the media into your spring meetings and have media availability during those things. You're not above this. The second thing is that the 4-4-2, whatever the hell it was, that was a joke. But here's the difference. Sturdy said that I don't know how it's going to be much of a difference. It's not, except for here's the deal. If you make it 5-11, the SEC is never going to go to 9 games. They're never going to do it. And if you make it 5-11, they're not going to do this play-in weekend that they want, which is they want to take their top 4 teams and actually play. They actually want to take their top 6 teams and go play, and do a 3-6, 1-6, 2-5, 3-4 type of deal, so that they play another game. They want to make the SEC championship weekend kind of like that. But they're not going to do that if you make it 5-11, because if you don't give me my 4 automatic bids, then none of those teams are playing for anything anymore. So I'm not going to do that.
I agree with that.
And then the SEC is not going to go to 9 games if you make it 5-11, because guess what? They're not going to do a 9th conference game for nothing. They're not going to do it for free. Greg Sankey's been very clear about if you want us to play another 9th conference game, that is more inventory for Mickey Mouse. And they're going to go to Disney and say, hey, pay us more money. We're giving you more inventory. It's the one thing that Jim Delaney did wrong, which was, yeah, we'll play another conference game for free. That didn't need to happen. And Greg Sankey's been very obvious. Hey, just because you do that, like an idiot, that doesn't mean I'm going to do that for free. But I do think that until you have equal playing field above, everybody's playing the same amount of conference games. Everybody's kind of trying to do the same thing in terms of scheduling. 5-11 makes a hell of a lot more sense than guaranteeing auto bids for teams that don't play the same kind of schedules. So that's where it makes sense to me. But I think Brad's right. I think you're going to see the 5 auto bids, and you're probably going to. It's probably not going to be diluted any differently. It's going to be 5 auto bids, but then the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get 3 or 4 more bids every year. And if you got Notre Dame in there, guess what? Now you're fighting for 1 more bid out of the Big 12 and the ACC. And
this will be the end of the ACC, because they'll have a hard time getting more than their champion in after this.
And they got 2 in last year. I think they can get 2 in again this year, and they'll be okay. It's just I'm just telling you, the big boys are going to eat on this, and the big boys are the Big Ten and the SEC. But the fact of the matter is, this all has everything to do with, if you want the SEC to play 9 games, don't go to 5-11, because then there's no added benefit for them to play a 9th game, and they're not going to do it. And there's a lot of people south of the Mason-Dixon line that look at Indiana's schedule and go, "Why the hell are we doing this?" There's not a real big argument against that. So That's where like the Southern Cals and the Notre Dames that play like 10 Power 5 conference schools a year. I go, whoa, man! Like if we're going to use strength of schedule as a demarcate, like a data point, like those kind of schools get shafted every year, and they really shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's the SEC when they were sent out their little chart this week on how tough their conference is. And so that's what they were trying to say is, let's go to a 5-11. We stay at 8 games, and then our strength of schedule is going to keep us, with, who knows how many teams. I think it's an interesting strategy. I think the sport would be better off at the 4-4, and then you would get those games. And to be honest, if you could get the SEC to go to 9 games, and then you have a Big Ten SEC tournament, now you have 10 games. And if there's 4 teams guaranteed in, the risk factor of playing a tough schedule isn't that bad. And I think that to me would be why I would be more inclined to go in that direction. But, like I said, my thoughts, and $2.50 will get you a Coke Zero. So well, actually $2.99 down here in Dallas. So now let's pivot over and let's talk about Illini basketball. And obviously Ked, Brad, and I have been out watching, high school guys, but let's talk a little bit. Brad, are there 2 things? It can be a player, it can be, this, that, or the other thing. Are there 2 things that you're going to be kind of interested in following here in the month of June to try to, fulfill your curiosity about a team that I think people are slightly underrating right now?
Well, I think making sure all the guys get here, get through all the, because they do have 1 million foreign guys. I mean, they have, it's like they brought in an army of foreigners. So make sure they all get here. Make sure they all get through admissions. Make sure all the, the clearinghouse, all that stuff get approved. I think that's the thing you're watching for, because you want to make sure they're. I think the other thing that I'm very interested in to see the schedule and how the makeup is. I do know that they had an ACC school reach out. They turned them down because they wanted to play a different ACC, a more higher, I think, marquee ACC school. So it'd be interesting to see how all that all comes together. But I guess how these guys, once they get them all here, how do they mesh? How do they fit together? How do they understand their roles? How do they? And I think you're going to see this right away, because you're going to have how do you put Tommy and Big Z on the floor together? I think watching them work out against each other in the summer is one thing. Putting them on the floor together is going to be interesting. See how they put those guys together on the court, and so I'm very intrigued to see what sets they're going to run. They're going to work on some high-low. They're going to work on some, what are they going to run out of that?
You can run a 5. You can run a 5 out the way those 2 guys shoot from the 3, Brad. I mean,
well, and they do
crazy,
because if you have those 2 guys on there, you can do a lot of things that allow, because Tomislav is also such a good passer too. So you can run things through him, up at the, at high post or whatever. And, with Z parked in the opposite side, I mean, he's wide open. You got actions, all kinds of different actions you can run there. And so it's fun. I think it's be fun how they put it all together.
Mike, Brad's a tough guy to follow with that comment, because I'm not going to repeat it. I'm not going to do that to our listeners. The only thing, I guess, because I agree with everything that he just said. I guess if I did have anything to add, I guess I would think that I personally do believe this, and not that there was anything wrong with last year's team. I think this team potentially, if they pan out, we can't control that and stay healthy. I think this team could be better than last year's team. I really believe that, based on the pieces and having being in the system 2 years in a row, because I don't think they're changing that. But for the most part, that's what I really, really want to see, I guess. And I do think the talent is there.
Matt?
What happened to everyday guys? That's the question I want to answer before they start playing games. Like, Brad and Sturdy and Ked can tell me I'm wrong, but every time we hear about like this, what they're doing, like either it's in the summer or like it's in September, when they get together in September and October, like, and we start to see them like doing 5-on-5 stuff and all that kind of stuff, right? What's the one thing I always hear? Well, they can't miss, right? Like, and look at all this offensive talent they got. I'd like to hear an off season or like at least like a preseason where it's like, God, points were really hard to come by. Like they're guarding the hell out of people. Like, I would like to see that. Like, I'd like to see Stojakovic like want to get into a fight with Ty Rodgers because it's really hard to score against him. Like, I'd like to see Brad go back to everyday guys and like this is how we build things and this is how we get cohesion. Like Sturdy talked about is like I'm curious if you're going to put Big Z and Big T on the floor together, how are they going to guard anybody? Like, that's a question I'd love to know the answer to because like, are they going to get stops? Because this team, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I watched a lot of games where they couldn't buy a defensive stop and. I think there's got to be a culture thing that happens before they ever, throw it up, at the start of the season. And I think they've got to lean on guys like Kylan Boswell and Ty Rodgers who can get stops and say, this is how we're going to play, fellas. Like, I think there's a lot of talent on this team, but I mean, if they don't from the jump, when they get together all as a group, like understand how important the defensive end of the floor is, then I differ with Keta. Then I don't think this team's going to be any better than they were last year because they can't get stops. Then guess what? Like it's going to be the same thing, different. It's going to be same song, different verse. Like, and so that's my concern is like, where did everyday guys go? Because if Underwood, gets the culture back on this team, I think they can be really, really good. They have a lot of talent.
Brad, any thoughts on that overall?
I think you're not going to rely on a bunch of freshmen this year. I think that does change things a little bit. And they had I think the other thing that I see, and this is, so I'm not, when I look at the defense, I look at it a little bit differently. When I look at this, their defensive numbers were actually quite good early in the season, which was interesting because you had a lot of new guys and you thought, well, they'd struggle. Well, I think as the scouting went out, I think the one thing that Illinois has to do a better job of is possibly tweaking defensive approaches depending on opponents. And you saw it, there were a couple games when they did make changes and it was so wildly effective because I think teams were so comfortable on the offensive end because they didn't make them uncomfortable. Well, how do you make them uncomfortable? Well, you don't do things that they're always, if you're always going to play ball screen drop coverage, they know what you're going to do. Exactly. If you're always going to do this, you know what you're going to do. So you have to make sure if you're not going to trap them, if you're always going to let them go one-on-one in the post, we know that. So as they start tweaking these things, then I think that does change their defense. I think that's what you're going to do. And I think having input from somebody else, because I think these guys are great. I mean, I think Antigua, Alexander, I think all these guys, Tyler Underwood's masterful on the offensive end at getting the right setups. But I think having like somebody like Coach Crocker is really important because what that does is it brings an outside viewpoint. It's someone who hasn't been in the system. He hasn't been there. And, one of the best things about being a coach is getting people who think differently than you. Because when you get somebody who thinks a little bit differently than you, he gives you different input. It's always going to come down to Brad Underwood. People always blame, Zach Hamer, he did this or he did that, whatever. It's Brad Underwood's scheme. Brad Underwood's the one who chooses this. It's Brad Underwood's offense. It's his defense. It's all Brad Underwood. If he didn't like it, they wouldn't do it. It's just that simple. So it's the way he wants to play. So getting a different viewpoint is always really important as a coach, and you always want to hear that different viewpoint. You may do the same thing you were going to do, but I'm telling you, when you hear someone else's opinion, it changes. It gives you, and even if you don't change it, it opens your eyes to other options and other possibilities that maybe you didn't think were feasible. And, this is like 32 years of coaching and, listening to people who would tell you other things. And I think that you're always trying to learn and grow. And I don't think Brad Underwood's any different. He's always trying to learn and grow and get better at his craft.
Yeah. And I was talking, go ahead, kid.
Sure. Okay. I don't know what they're doing because, we're not hanging out with them. I want to see them get on the horn, talk to other coaches. Brad's right. They have to make quicker in-game adjustments to me. One of the most disappointing things that I've ever read in the Brad Underwood era, I think, Sturdy, you sent it to us in the group, was when Julian Reese talked about when he got to play against Illinois, it was like he was licking his chops. And his words, not mine, his words were, they don't make any adjustments, and I know I'm going to get single coverage, and it was Christmas for him, or Happy Hanukkah, or whatever the hell you celebrate. But my point is, they have to be able to make adjustments. So during the offseason, don't be too proud to ask. Call the coaches. And then you watch the game films last year where you thought, well, maybe I should have done this and maybe I should have done that. Will this have worked? Because if you go and do the same thing, I'm telling you, it's going to be awful. If you go back to when the Illinois lost to Connecticut, I mean, Coleman Hawkins was really upset because, and even Terrence Shannon, they did nothing. They stayed the same. And your philosophy is great. But if you're not going to make good and James adjustments, you're going to struggle. We all talk about how Underwood does a good job of, changing with the system. That part needs to change, because if you're in games and if you can't trust your coaches, one of the things, I forget what state it was, I got certified in, one of the things they said in one of my coaching classes was this: if you can't trust your assistants, why have them? And I know we're talking basketball, but that's one thing Brett Bielema does, and I know Shauna Green does. They trust their coaches. I watch Cat Williams, not Cat Wells, that's his nickname, Coach Williams, take the clipboard at the end of a women's basketball game. Shauna gives it to him to draw plays. I want to see the same thing with the man program. I just don't think you can continue to do the same thing, because they're not going to change. If you play Illinois and if they can't make adjustments, that's like going to the store and asking for ice cream all over again.
Well, and I think it's basically, what is it, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and Festivus for the rest of us, or whatever. I think if we watch Seinfeld. I was talking with a prominent AAU coach down in Memphis, and he's a big one for he was a big one for man-to-man defense, and my argument to him was, if you can play a zone, but you do have to teach the zone. And I got this from a guy down in Atlanta, Georgia. But if you're going to play zone, you have to teach your players that if they are on ball, that has to be like man to man, whoever has the ball coverage. Because one of the things I see with zones is that guys, you can tell that guys are less aggressive, and then they allow the guy who's got the ball to do skip passes. And to me, the whole key to playing a zone is your person, whoever it is who's on the ball, has to play almost like a balls to the wall man to man, so that they can't get a pass over the top. And all of a sudden your zone defense becomes really good. I think the thing about the Euro players is people assume they're not quick, but the one thing they seem to be a little bit better on is help defense. They seem to be a little better at playing off-ball defense, and sometimes their on-the-ball defense can be a little iffy. But I think if you play the ball hard with the roster they have, I think you could have a pretty good zone. But I'm not saying you're going to do that every time down the court, but I think you could throw that at people and give them a little bit of problems.
If you want to give them a different look, I think that's great. I'm sorry, Matt. That's great. But the thing that you want to, I never did, and I'm going to tell you, college basketball is different. It's not like it was in the early 90s and in the 80s. You play a zone, teams punish you. As bad as the three-point shooting team was last year against Illinois, Brad Underwood, I mean, he got up right away, and then you get layups. The purpose of a zone is to make teams shoot the ball, not just Illinois. I know this is an Illinois content that we're doing here. Teams punish you. That's why you don't see zones, 80-90% of the time. If you want to come out of a timeout and you want to give them a different look, I mean, for me, I was all into a 1-3-1 or sometimes some token pressure or a diamond and one. That's different. But if you think you're going to rely on zones today, don't just watch Illinois. Watch how teams do it. And there's a reason why a lot of teams don't play zone. And it's not just athleticism. You can be the most athletic team, the fastest team, quickest team. You pay. They find holes, and as we can criticize Illinois' defense all we want, they made teams pay when they win the zone. Sorry, Matt,
but I will tell you though, Ked, that's because it's coached wrong. If you let a guy, if you're not going balls to the wall on the guy who's got the ball, if you're not making him uncomfortable, then you're right. You shouldn't do a zone, because he's just going to throw it to the open guy and shred you. And that's the thing that's always got me is when you play, this far away from the guy who's got the ball, so that he can't make the skip pass, he can't do the easy thing like that. Now all of a sudden you're talking a zone that's tough. If you watch how John Thompson used to coach it, back in the day. Now I agree with you though. I don't think you can go zone anywhere near more than 15 minutes a game, but I think you can throw it out there if you got the right personnel and you coach the ball correctly.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get this started on an X's and O's conversation because, I mean, like, Sturdy can tell me if I'm totally off on this, but, like, I go back to the Fisser Forum when Kylan Boswell basically told everybody he was coming back. And the quote, excuse my language, is there's shit that happened this year that it's just not going to fly anymore now that I'm the leader of this team. Like, Sturdy can kind of attest, and I thought I read a lot from him. Like they would tell guys defensively what they wanted him to do, and then they just didn't go do it. Like, so like the idea that like you've got to look at like a Kylan Boswell and a Ty Rogers, where like in the months of September and October when they're doing stuff, if your guy scores on you, that's not okay. Like that's not what we do here. Like that's not okay. And like they're going to have to lean on Kai Boswell to like be a lieutenant at arms for Brad Underwood and go like, guys, this is not this stuff's got to stop, and it's got to stop now. Like we can talk X's and O's all we want. There's a will of a player that if he wants to do something bad enough, he'll get it done. Like, and last year I saw a lot of coaches that were trying to help them defensively and guys that sometimes just didn't give a darn if their guy scored on them or not, because then they were just going to go down the other end and score too. And so like there's a will here that has to like flip. And that's why I say what happened to everyday guys, because everyday guys, to me at least, perception wise, was built off of we're going to be a pain in the ass to score against every night, if nothing else. And that's how Brad Underwood got to be like a number one seed. That's how Ayo Dosunmu like handled everybody, which was you're going to do your job, and I'm going to make damn sure you do your job on the defensive end of the floor. Like that's kind of what you have to lean on guys like Kai Boswell and Ty Rogers this year to do. And I want to hear that coming out of September and October before they throw it up in November. That's what I was talking about. We can talk X's and O's until we're all blue in the face, but if the guys on the floor don't want to do it, no matter what they're being taught, it's not going to work. And I think that you have to rely on your leaders to kind of make everybody fall in line. And that's got to happen this year. That's got to happen with Kai, and that's got to happen with Ty. And to a certain extent, it's got to happen, with Tommy too. And that's because he's coming back as a leader too. So if your leaders aren't leading, like it's going to get reflected on the defensive end of the floor, no matter what scheme you run.
Any other final thoughts as we kind of wrap this one up after we're getting to the hour marks? I think we're going to exhaust people here on a Sunday night.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. No, how about this one? Did you see Richard Jefferson talking on his podcast? Anybody else see this?
I didn't know.
Richard Jefferson talking about AAU basketball. He pulled his kids off AAU basketball because they spent an hour at practice working on how to beat the zone press and all this stuff. And so he said, if that's not why we're here at AAU, we're here to get better individual, get better skills. And I think so. And I'm going to circle back to Illinois here through this, but I think that's why the European guys become so coveted, because they don't spend an hour at practice working on how to beat a zone press. They work in an hour in practice on their skills, and they get more developed. That's why these guys I think they put them in like breakdown situations. So they're actually reading defenses and doing all these things. And I think that's why that's why I'm really high on Illinois. So I use that transition. I think these guys are smart. They understand basketball. They're going to be really good. Now, Matt's right. They have to guard. So that's going to be the key. Can Ty Rogers and Kylan Boswell get all these guys to understand the importance of the defensive end so that they can use this offensive skill and the passing that they have to be as successful as they can be? And I think, Stojakovic, I think, is going to be a big-time player. I think people nationally are underestimating how good he is. He is a bucket. He knows how to score. You put him with talented guys around him, he's going to be fantastic. I love the pieces. They have depth. They have a lot of different options that they can use. So, yeah, I'm real. And so I kind of use that to segue into this. I think that they're going to have – I think that's why the European guys are so coveted right now, and also why Illinois is going to be really good. I think Illinois is a top 10 team. Okay, I said it. I really do.
Ked?
I'm not saying that. I'm not having people try to come throw rocks at my windows. Not happening. But do I think they're good? Do I think they're good? I do think so. And the one thing Brad said, they don't. I think because Andre played for California, they won -6 games. Nobody cared. You know what I'm saying to you? No one cared. He's coming to the media mecca of the world, the Big Ten. That's on every network, even Sesame Street channels. People are going to see how good he is. And so now, then the defense is going to be tough. But the one knock on him was, Matt's right. Can he guard? Brad and I've talked about it before. He turned the ball over a lot, but that was because he had to do everything. I think I said it. I don't know the numbers, and I'm sure you fellows know. Illinois had a guy on the first team All Big Ten for the last 5 years. This year they didn't. They do have 2 guys that are going to the first round of the NBA draft. But I think Andre is good enough to be All Big Ten first team is what I really think.
Matt?
I think Kedrick Prince is about to learn what Cal Berkeley Twitter is all about. Real quick. Yeah, I think they're good. To give you a Matt Painter analogy, I think we're good. How good? How the hell am I supposed to know? And one of the things I love about this is that it's even my season, the season I cover mostly, which is football, it's a 4-month journey. Basketball is a 4-month journey. And Illinois wasn't the same team at Christmas. Trust me, I was at the bragging rights game. Than they were in March. They weren't the same team. And so I'm fascinated by how this team is going to, with this leadership that's coming back for the first time, could actually be better than they were when we flip the calendar to 2026. I think that could happen. How good? I don't know. But I sure think that with the pieces that they have, I'd like to think that they're going to be better in 2026 than they are in 2025 right now.
Yeah, I think this team has a huge amount of potential. And obviously, as Harry Carey used to say, potential is a French word that means you haven't done doo-doo yet. But I do think this team will have some potential. I think the key will be, and maybe this is like a Brett Bielema type of thing, but how unified can these guys get as a team? They're going to go from a bunch of guys who kind of know each other in multiple languages, and half the team's talking English as a second language. And how do you get these guys together so that you have that he didn't back me up. I have to hold him accountable, so that these guys can hold each other accountable, and so these guys can want to be held accountable. I think that's an interesting thing, how this team's going to get together. And some years Underwood is really good at it. Some years he's not. And I think the more I look at it, he needs an Io or a Terrence Shannon. And can Boswell be that guy? Can Ty Rodgers be that guy? I don't know. That's the journey that we're going to see. Because if you get those guys who are the glue guys, I think if this team is unified, I think it could be pretty good. And then if not, you can't have defense as a second language either. And that's when you get into all sorts of problems that give Brad Underwood, some hair loss and some gray hair that he doesn't want to deal with. So
it's funny that all these art schools are hiring general manager. Illinois is hiring an ESL teacher. So English second language. So
yes, exactly. Got a lot of that going around. So but the bottom line is Illinois on both sides. Brad Underwood and his coaches have kind of went heavily into the foreign ranks. I think they would probably be the second wave behind Gonzaga and a couple other schools. And you have Brett Bielema, who kind of pioneered the let's keep our own key players because we don't have enough money to go into the portal. And, he's been doing that for a few years. Now we'll see as they get more and more successful. I'm starting to see more of the high talent athletes looking at Illinois as a first choice, not as a second choice. So it is getting kind of fun to see where we're at. Well, folks, look, if you've enjoyed what you're seeing here, go to IlliniGuys.com. You can subscribe for $99 a year. You think, oh, that's an ancient model, but the bottom line is that model is what allows us to get out and travel and cover things, so that we can, to go to Memphis or go to Kansas City is not free. And to get out there on the road, it costs a little bit of money. We've been at $99 since the day we started. We haven't followed the inflation that has happened in that time frame. So if you want to be a part of that, but what you get for that is really important. You get the message boards where it goes from a passive read and listen to us to be able to interact with us. And that is something that makes IlliniGuys.com a little bit of an extra value that we think is worth it. And of course, you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. You can get all of our videos without having to do any work, if that's what trips your trigger. And of course, our podcasts are out there on just about every podcast distributor that you can find us in. With that, folks, we will be back later in the week. Until then, go Illini.